Welcome back to the channel. Everyone, today, we are looking at a massive update in the combat sports world that feels less like a standard match announcement and more like a complete system reboot of the boxing landscape. Just when we thought the programming was set for the end of the year, a critical error occurred in the mainframe of MVP Promotions, forcing a hard pivot that has left the industry stunned. We are talking about the sudden collapse of the Jake Paul versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight, an immediate, almost algorithmic shift to a new, arguably more dangerous opponent, Anthony Joshua. This isn't just a replacement fight. This is a complete reconfiguration of the software that runs celebrity boxing. When the news broke that the original bout scheduled for November 14th in Miami was offline due to legal issues surrounding Davis, many expected a long downtime. Usually, when a main event falls apart this close to the execution date, promoters scramble, the network crashes, and fans are left with for 0-4 error, fight not found message. But Jake Paul and his partner, CEO Nakisa Bidarian, didn't let the server go down. Instead, they immediately initiated a new protocol, scanning the database of available fighters to find a patch that would not only save the date, but potentially upgrade the user experience for the millions of fans watching globally. According to Bidarian, the moment it became clear that Gervonta Davis was no longer a viable option, effectively disconnected from the network, the response in the fighting community was overwhelming. It wasn't just a few names tossing their hats in the ring. Bidarian revealed to TMZ that nearly 30 fighters immediately reached out or accepted a preliminary offer to step in. That is a staggering amount of traffic. It shows just how much bandwidth Jake Paul now commands in this sport. Years ago, professional boxers viewed him as a bug in the code, something to be ignored until it went away. Now, they view him as a premier operating system for big paydays and massive exposure. Among those 30 names, the data analytics at MVP Promotions identified 3 primary targets that fit the specific parameters they were looking for: Ryan Garcia, Terence Crawford, and the former heavyweight champion of the world, Anthony Joshua. This wasn't a random selection. This was a calculated search for the highest compatibility with the current market trends. They needed a name that carried enough legacy data to matter to purists, but enough modern relevance to keep the casual audience logged in. And while Garcia and Crawford are massive names, the decision to gravitate toward Anthony Joshua signals a shift in processing power that we haven't seen from Paul before. So, how did Anthony Joshua fit the bill? Why did the algorithm select him over the others? The decision ultimately came down to a mix of spectacle, marketability, and stylistic considerations that essentially act as the hardware specs of this event. In his conversation with TMZ, Bidarian was surprisingly transparent about the coding behind this matchup. He admitted that while facing a heavyweight giant is inherently risky, the stylistic matchup might actually be a cleaner interface for Jake Paul and the chaotic speed of Gervonta Davis. Bidarian explained that Tank Davis is a much smaller man physically, but his processor speed is off the charts. He is quick, fast, precise, and super skilled, with knockout power that acts like instantaneous malware. Once it touches you, the system shuts down. Fighting Tank means dealing with high-frequency attacks and almost zero latency in reaction times. For a boxer like Jake, who is still developing his own source code and learning the nuances of the sport, keeping up with that level of speed is a nightmare. It is like trying to run modern software on a dial-up connection. The lag will get you killed. Anthony Joshua, on the other hand, presents a different set of variables. He is a massive hardware unit, big, strong, and possessing undeniable knockout power. However, Bidarian noted that AJ is definitely slower than Tank. He is less glitchy in his movement, more traditional and upright. Bidarian argued that Joshua is definitely less skilled than Tank in terms of pure, fluid improvisation. This creates a specific window of opportunity. It gives Jake, who has been in the sport for a fraction of time, the opportunity to display a better skill set than he would have against someone as fast and compact as Davis. It allows Jake to run his game plan without being overwhelmed by sheer speed. It is a dangerous fight, absolutely, but in the eyes of MVP Promotions, it is a more winnable fight because the variables are more predictable. This brings us to the terms and conditions of this new agreement. Every fight has its own configuration settings, and this one is no different. The reported agreement includes specific conditions designed to balance the scales, and ensure the fight runs smoothly without crashing. The bout is set for 8 3-minute rounds. They will be using 10-ounce gloves, which is standard for this level of competition, ensuring that the impact is real. However, the most critical spec here is the weight limit. There is a maximum weight of 245 pounds set for Anthony Joshua. For Jake Paul, who has been competing closer to the cruiserweight limit, these terms add a necessary safety margin. He is essentially overclocking his system to step up to heavyweight, while Joshua has to ensure he comes in lean. It creates a localized network where both fighters can operate at peak efficiency. If Joshua were coming at a massive, unchecked weight, the size difference would likely be too much for the firewall of Paul's defense to handle. By capping it at 245, they are ensuring that the fight remains competitive rather than a complete mismatch of hardware. Choosing Anthony Joshua is a massive statement. It signals Paul's desire to be taken seriously not only as a showman, a master of the user interface, but as a legitimate competitor with back-end stability. Joshua brings global recognition to the table. He brings heavyweight credibility. When you plug Anthony Joshua into an event, you are instantly tapping into the UK market and the global heavyweight fan base. It expands the network coverage of MVP promotions significantly. It implies that Paul believes his developing boxing skill set is robust enough to stand in the pocket with a man who has held a unified heavyweight belts. Now, we have to address the root cause of this massive shift. Why did the Gervonta Davis fight collapse in the first place? To use a tech metaphor, there was a critical security breach in the background processes of the Davis camp. The original exhibition was set for November 14th in Miami and was scheduled to be streamed globally on Netflix. This was going to be a massive stress test for Netflix's live sports streaming capabilities. However, the matchup dissolved after a civil lawsuit alleging assault was filed against Davis in Miami-Dade County. This wasn't a minor bug. This was a system-critical failure. In the modern era of sports promotion, major platforms like Netflix and MVP Promotions have strict protocols regarding the legal standing of their athletes. A development of that magnitude immediately derailed the promotional plans. It triggered a failsafe. You cannot promote a massive, celebratory event when one of the primary avatars is embroiled in a serious legal battle involving allegations of assault. It creates a public relations latency that makes the event impossible to sell to advertisers and the general public. MVP Promotions didn't hesitate. They executed a quick command to scrap the event, but they refused to shut down the entire operation. They had vowed to keep Jake Paul active before the end of the year. They had a promise to their user base, the fans, and a contract with the platform to deliver content. That pledge led them to canvass the sport for potential replacements, essentially sending out a ping to every active server in the boxing world to see who was online and ready to fight. This resulted in that unusually large list of fighters who signaled their willingness. It turns out, when the money is right and the platform is massive, everyone wants to log in. It is interesting to note the other potential connections that failed to establish. Among the early candidates was Ryan Garcia. Reports suggest that Garcia was high on the list of potential patches for this event. He reportedly received a December fight offer, and for a moment, it looked like the networks might align. A Paul versus Garcia fight would have generated massive traffic on social media, given their shared history and volatile online personas. It would have been a viral sensation, overloading the bandwidth of every combat sports news site. However, industry reporting suggests that a deal with Garcia was blocked by a firewall. His promoter, Golden Boy Promotions, appeared focused on setting up a different bout for 2026. There were administrative permissions issues. Golden Boy likely has a different roadmap for Garcia, and slotting him into a Jake Paul event on short notice didn't fit their long-term architecture. The connection timed out, and MVP had to look elsewhere. That is the reality of the boxing business. Sometimes the hardware is compatible, but the administrators won't grant access. This leads us back to Joshua. It is fascinating to see how MVP Promotions operates like a tech startup in a legacy industry. Traditional boxing promotions often take months, sometimes years, to negotiate a single fight. They operate on legacy code, bogged down by bureaucratic bloat and ego. MVP Promotions recognized the crash, the Davis cancellation, and deployed a fix within days. They treated the cancellation not as a catastrophic failure, but as a feature update. They swapped out a smaller, faster opponent for a larger, more globally recognized brand name. In doing so, they may have actually upgraded the value of the event. Let's talk about the risk assessment here. For Anthony Joshua, accepting this fight is a calculated gamble. He is entering a different ecosystem. He is stepping away from the traditional championship structure to fight a YouTuber. If he loses, his stock crashes harder than a crypto coin in a bear market. It would be a permanent stain on his legacy, a virus in his career file that he could never delete. But if he wins, he taps into a new demographic. He refreshes his brand for a younger generation that consumes content on TikTok and Netflix rather than pay-per-view cable. He effectively updates his operating system for the modern era. For Jake Paul, the risk is physical. He is fighting a man who has knocked out world champions. He is testing the limits of his own hardware. If the analysis by Bidarian is wrong, if Joshua isn't too slow, if his power is too much, then Paul is going to get shut down in the most literal sense. But that is what makes this compelling. It is the uncertainty. It is the clash of different architectures. You have the classic, powerhouse heavyweight against the modern, agile disruptor. The fact that Netflix is the platform hosting this is also significant. We are moving away from the old cable box decryption model of pay-per-view. This fight will be available to anyone with a subscription. It is democratizing access to the fight game. It ensures that the latency between the event happening and the world seeing it is zero. The sheer volume of data that will be pushed to the servers on fight night will be immense. By securing a name like Anthony Joshua, MVP guarantees that people who have never watched a Jake Paul fight will tune in just to see if the former champ can restore the factory settings of the boxing world. The conditions of the fight, the 245-pound limit specifically, act as a regulator. It prevents Joshua from coming in as a super heavyweight bully. It forces him to optimize his performance. It shows that the negotiations were sophisticated. This wasn't just a fight me text message. This was a complex integration of two very different businesses. MVP Promotions had to ensure that the terms didn't put their primary asset, Jake Paul, in an unwinnable scenario. They are engineering a spectacle, but they are also engineering a path to victory, or at least a path to competitiveness. The shift from Davis to Joshua also changes the training data for Paul. Preparing for a 5 feet 5 inches southpaw with lightning speed is completely different from preparing for a 6 feet 6 inches orthodox powerhouse. Paul's team has to completely wipe their previous strategy and install a new game plan in a very short amount of time. They have to reconfigure his defense, his footwork, and his attack vectors. This is a massive stress test for his coaching staff. Can they download the necessary tactical updates into Paul's muscle memory before the opening bell? As we look toward the end of the year, this event stands as a testament to the agility of MVP Promotions. In an industry known for broken promises and canceled main events, they managed to salvage a disaster. They turned a system error into a feature launch. The Davis lawsuit could have been the blue screen of death for their 2025 calendar. Instead, it became the catalyst for arguably the biggest crossover fight we have seen yet. It leaves us with plenty of questions to process. Is Bidarian's assessment of Joshua accurate? Is AJ really slower and less skilled than Tank in a way that benefits Jake? Or is that just promotional spin to encrypt the reality of the danger? Can Jake Paul's chin withstand the output of a true heavyweight? And will the casual fans understand the magnitude of this switch? We also have to wonder about the long-term impact on the boxing network. If this fight generates the numbers everyone expects, it further validates the influencer boxing model. It proves that the old protocols of earning your way up are being overwritten by the new protocols of marketing your way in. It is a disruption that makes the traditionalists uncomfortable, but the user numbers don't lie. The engagement is there. The traffic is there. So get your systems ready. The update is coming. November 14th might be off the table for Davis, but the end-of-year schedule just got a massive graphical upgrade. We are going from a high-speed tactical match to a heavyweight blockbuster. It is a different kind of fight, a different kind of spectacle, and it proves that in the fight game, just like in tech, if you aren't innovating, you're obsolete. I want to hear from you guys in the comments section below. What is your analysis of this data? Do you think trading Tank Davis for Anthony Joshua is a smart upgrade or a fatal system error for Jake Paul? Is Bidarian right about Joshua being a more winnable fight, or is his logic corrupted? Drop your thoughts. Let's get a discussion thread going. And as always, make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications turned on so you don't miss any patches or updates to this story. We will be monitoring the network closely for any more news on the fight camp, the training footage, and the final contract signatures. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next upload.